Well, welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy and Mike. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Jumping back in.
Good morning, Mike.
We got some good topics today for you. We got a lot of news. We got a lot of things that we're kind of learning this week. A beat on the street. We want to kind of talk about some things we're learning and just playing with inside Fabric, I guess. I guess this is kind of the right time to do this. You know, you get Microsoft Build. There's another handful of features that come out. You've got to start playing with these new features and figuring out what's going on there. So this is probably part and par for the road. That being said, our main topic today will be just kind of starting off the conversation around Microsoft Fabric and continuous integration and continuous development. There's been some changes on the Microsoft side on how Microsoft envisions this working. So we're going to kind of talk about that. What's new with Fabric CI/CD? What can we do here with automation Git integration, automatic deployment pipelines, and Fabric CI/CD? This is the article that Microsoft has here for May 2025. So good timing. That being said, Tommy, what do you got? Any beat from the streets or news items you want to kind of cover off?
So I think especially with how rapid development has happened with Fabric, Build, all the things, I'm still dealing with a lot of projects where we're still goal setting for the organization, for their projects, what they want to do short term, long term. And I wanted to bring this to you, Mike, if you were seeing the same situation, we'll say, where we're dealing with organizations who want to go fast. They hear about the news coming out, like, oh, we want to do Fabric. Oh, we want to do Copilot. But obviously, we've talked about this a ton. There's skill. There's the technology that needs to be in place. There's the data that needs to be in place. So goals setting in the age of Fabric is kind of how I'm kind of theming this for you. And I just want to hear from you, your situation or how you're dealing with that now, because I'm getting a lot of organizations wanting to push for the latest and greatest. They're like looking at the new Hot Wheels and they're going, oh, the new Hot Wheels came out. Can we get that? It's like, we don't have a ramp yet. So how are you hearing this? What are you hearing from people? Are they excited about the new features?
I think people are interested in the new features. I think a lot of what we're doing right now is we're migrating a lot of customers from Power BI and starting to explore more Fabric related things. I think we're still in this, what is Fabric? You know, how confusing are notebooks? You know, and we're starting to get to this point where I'm seeing a lot of customers transition from, okay, we were just doing Power BI. We were using just data flows. We're now starting to use Fabric. And in using Fabric, they're actually finding much value from centralizing their data. Everything's coming to one single place. And I think that's actually hugely valuable for the team to see that, like, there's now a central place where data lives. What's happening now, I think, though, is, to your point, Tommy, where the questions are coming from are more around what's translytical? How would I build notebooks? What other tools should I be interested in around this new Fabric ecosystem? Is it something in Visual Studio Code? What are user data functions? How do we work with them? So we're starting off simple with like notebooks, pipelines, and lakehouses. And then from there, it kind of expands into these other use cases there. And then we get more questions around, well, we have other needs of the business. Can Fabric do that? I mean, usually the answer is yes. Usually there's really not too many questions the business can ask that Fabric can't do at this point.
But at the same time, and this is the thing that I find really humorous, really funny now, is I cannot tell you how many projects I had pre-Fabric where we had pilots, and it was so 1 foot at a time in the water to just get Power BI for the organization. There was a lot of security, a lot of trepidation before just diving straight into Power BI. And now, to your point, we're introducing, a ton more, spades worth more. That's not the right way to say that, but you know what I'm trying to say. We're introducing so many more features, functionalities, and technology into the space. And a lot of organizations still want to jump head in. So the way I've been taking this with some of the projects is, it's okay to touch Fabric a little, but it's okay not to do the whole shebang of all the Fabric features, especially if we're still just touching Power BI, if we're not comfortable with that. And that's kind of led me almost to a conflict or a decision point myself. where rather than looking at this like a Mario video game where level 1's Power BI and then you have to win Power BI to get to Fabric, you
Mm.
don't really have to do that. That being said, I think there's something in me where I'm arguing with myself on that, but right where you kind of want to know what you're doing with Power BI because that is kind of the end goal of what we're doing with the Microsoft data products.
I think I see where you're going with this question or
Yeah.
this statement here. I mean, I agree with you on some levels where, I think it really depends on the skills of your team. Where is your team comfortable, right? And so I push a lot of teams or data BI teams have a lot of SQL skills. SQL skills seem to be very common across a lot of these teams. And you're either a DBA or you've gotten a little access to a database where you could write views on things. And so there's still a lot of, I'm going to call it old mentality that's still kind of digging around that I observe, right? And what I mean by old mentalities is, everything has to be a view.
Right.
We can do these complex view things and it just works. And so when we introduce things like Direct Lake and lake houses and notebooks, this kind of puts people in their head a little bit. I'm like, well, time out. You were writing these really complex stored procedures inside SQL. If you can write a stored procedure, you can write a Python notebook. Like yes, they're different. Yes, it's different languages, but like it's the same level of complexity, I think. And it could easily, you can define variables and parameters and build temporary tables to use. Well, it's the same kind of concepts. It's not that far off. Maybe the syntax is slightly different, but I think there's hesitation there. So I guess I'll say this. It really depends on the team that you're coming into and how willing they are and how fast individuals can learn in there. I do think there's, to your point, Tommy, not every individual inside the business should immediately say, yeah, we're going to light up Fabric for everyone and we're just going to go. I do think there needs to be some, at least thought from a small group of people, that center of excellence that kind of says, okay, what are we going to do? Are we actually going to centralize things? What are some of our basic policies that we're going to have this, and slow roll it? Go out to a couple people, open it up for if a single team is asking for it, work with them, let them build it. But to your point, Tommy, sometimes we're not capturing the fundamentals of like how to do a decent data model, and yet we're trying to now add all this Fabric stuff on top of it, which shifts what we can do, and we can move that work up into Fabric, or the data engineering side of things. But if we don't really understand what we're trying to build visually, we're not really understanding the star schema, we're not trying to build good data models that are performant, sometimes we hurt ourselves there and we're not actually building a good data model. Instead, we're just adding more messy tools to the situation, and we don't have rules around like where data should go and where should we put it.
And honestly, that's what's keeping me grounded, because I think it's so easy to get caught up with all the technology wanting to do that. It's easier for you and I as the individual to say that because we can test it out. But for an organization, what's keeping me grounded is a phrase that I've been using is the goal is not the technology. The goal is what the solutions that the technology provides. And rather than being wrapped up in, oh, there's notebooks, oh, there's a lake house, we can centralize our data. Well, is that the solution that we need right now? Like, what are we really trying to do? Then that goal, that objective will dictate what technology we're going to use or how far we go into that. I have a pocket full of projects still that I would say the best case for them right now is to focus on their Power BI development, because it doesn't matter to me if you have a lake house or if you're using notebooks if people can't get their data and they can't trust their data. So again, some organizations, they're ready to go. They have the people and they have the need for what Fabric's doing. But again, the solution is what should dictate the technology, not the other way around.
I'd agree with that one. So anyways, just interesting thoughts on that one. Yeah. So I still think you're right. Goal setting is probably good here. I think you're going to want to have someone study this. You're going to want a lot of proof of concepts. You're going to want to figure out like, where does a lakehouse fit? Who should be learning this? We have these things called pipelines. Who needs to be working on them? Like there's definitely a skill set range that you're going to want to find the right people to do that. And I think right now the challenge becomes for organizations is how do we diagnose or figure out which is the right person to put in that space? to one, let them explore and learn what works. Like one, you have to just understand the technology, but then two, how do you use that technology in concert with whatever data process you're trying to build, right?
You just
It's
brought
got
up,
to it's got to go together, right? You have to have someone with business knowledge of like why we're doing this. And even now more than ever, like I feel like we're getting to the place where I used to be very, very pro, like bring everything to the lake house. Everything's got to go to the lake house. But now that we can make semantic models with, direct lake and import models, like I'm a little less motivated to like put everything in the lake house now. And so, yeah, when I think about your security layer, right, the reason I brought everything to the lake house is because I couldn't put it in a semantic model. Like I had to bring everything, like it didn't matter what it was. If it was a date table, it was like everything needed to come down to the lake house. But now that I have, a highly performant direct lake and import mode together in the same semantic model, like there's no reason why I can't now do both of these things. And so
I never thought I'd hear you say that.
Well, I think the technology is changing, right? I mean, it was a hard requirement. If I wanted it in the semantic model, it had to go to the lake house. We're seeing shifts. And this is the nice part, I think, of what we're in is, Microsoft is really, they have a huge at their disposal, tons of tools. What's the right way to get that into the semantic model? And then you can have other conversations around, okay, what do my users consuming Power BI reports need to really do? Right. And then you can design a system that adjusts for that. Right. You can change it in a way that it aligns to your business goals.
I got a scenario for you because you brought up a really good point here about the people. And I think this is a big focus for a lot of organizations. Their critical decision point on going ahead is going to be the skill level. And a lot of this, you're going to be hard pressed, I think, to find someone who does all of it or is aware of all of it. I think you still have a lot of people in there in those kind of, I know there was just the Kentucky Derby or the Belmont this week where people are still in their lanes on what they do, whether they're in engineering, and a lot of people, they probably just touched a few of those things. Mm-hmm. If you hear from a client or you're on a project, Mike, this is the scenario here, that we are pushing ahead. We are going where no man has gone before. No person has gone before with Fabric, but we don't have any people who've done it. Are you going to lean closer to recommending one of the two options? Either we are going to then invest heavily in the people, we are going to skill up everyone, or are we going to push back from that goal? So those are the two scenarios. A company wants to move ahead with Fabric. They want to go as far as they can. They don't have the people. So what are you going to and again, scenario based here, but are you going to then push, okay, we're going to devote X amount of resources and budget and money towards getting the people skilled up and hiring the right people? Or is that to you a red flag to say, listen, we got to do some headway here. If I know you want this, but we have no one to do this yet.
I'm going to say it's going to really highly depend on like what you're trying to solve for, right? Just to say we want to use Fabric and just to start with it, to me, not a compelling enough story to say let's spend time and resources to go do it, right? Mm-hmm. What I prefer to have like a business use case, like something that's causing pain somewhere in the organization. Let me give you an example. We have a SQL server that's on-prem. The SQL server on-prem is continually getting data through a gateway and bringing it to semantic models. And there's multiple semantic models hitting that same server, maybe different databases, but that server is starting to fall over. At certain points in time, we get random failures of queries not executing because congestion, something slow, like we don't know, like there's stuff happening. So either we spend a lot of time like really digging into and tuning all the semantic models that are hitting that same SQL server and looking at all the logs, or what if we lift some of that SQL server away from the SQL server? What if we loaded it once to the lakehouse and repointed the larger semantic models at the lakehouse, make the loading happen one time or incrementally or whatever the logic is to get the data from that on-prem SQL server to the lakehouse? So what that does is that is a opportunity where you would place Fabric that solves a real problem. So I would look for those use cases, and the challenge of this is how do you even get to these points where you say these parts of Fabric are solving these other pain points you have inside your Power BI only world, right? And so I think part of that's just Googling, part of that's going to conferences, part of that's just like listening to other people, talking to the community. Like I think Microsoft is putting out articles that are helping you with this. And I think the idea here is you want to move more of your data system away from on-prem, bring it closer to Fabric, because then you have the ability to scale up and pay for what you need inside the Fabric space. So that's where I'm going to go after. I'm not going to just let the business just go, we need Fabric, and then just let them go wild and figure out what it, like, I'm going to sit down and ask them for what's the use case? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to give more access to more people? Like there's some reasons behind this. Like what is the reason? Let's just unpack that reason. And then once we get there, then we can mobilize people and figure out, okay, who's the right person? What do we need to go learn? Do we need to go hire a consultant? Is this something if someone goes to learn.microsoft.com and gets certified in something and then we use it? So there's knowledge out there. It's just a matter of, does the business want to allow people to have time to learn it?
Well, it's a funny thing where if an organization just says going after Fabric, well, I guarantee you no one's going to be happy if you have Fabric, quote unquote, because if it didn't solve anything, then you're still in Fabric and I'm still here. So awesome. But to me, it's the same thing. Like if you have an organization where, and I think I said something that apparently was groundbreaking, but if you have an organization where they just want Fabric or they just want Power BI, but they don't know what it's actually going to solve for the organization, no one's going to be happy if you also now have the licensing and people can use it. It has to solve something that people, to your point, it has to be a pain point that people are solving.
Yes. I mean, what is the reason behind wanting to move or change or adjust something? If the reason behind it, there's nothing that's going to make it better. Like what's a business, and this is actually a bad practice, I would argue. A business shouldn't just go out and run and go grab new technology if it's not solving some sort of real world problem, right?
1000%. Preach.
Look, if I'm using Dataverse or I'm using Dynamics and I need to get data somewhere else for reporting very quickly and easily, great. I'm hearing things about Fabric and Power BI that are going to make it easier for me to get things from Dynamics to my team to report on. Great. That's a pain point we're trying to solve, right? I've got this SQL server that's falling over. I want to move it over. Yes, that's a pain point. We're trying to solve it. We're doing too much data engineering work in Excel files. We want to centralize it. Let's bring it to somewhere else. That's a pain point. Let's try and solve that. So there's a lot of these, like, you already have these pain points. You've already identified them. Anyone in the business you could ask these questions to, and they'll be able to identify the pain points. Now the trick is, can you take those pain points and redesign them and bring them into Fabric? That's the next question. And so I think that's where I would go with the team trying to get started with Fabric. And a lot of times I feel like the best learning happens when you just have the project and you work side by side with people to build stuff. I have one customer where we just, when they need time, we schedule a 2-hour working session. They come with some questions. Hey, I want to do this and this and this and this. Hey, we've got these data flows. We think we should migrate them. What do you think? And we just sit down and we just stub it out. We work as fast as we can for the 2 hours. Okay, let's address one or two of these problems in the call, building things, clicking on stuff, making notebooks, using Copilot, teaching the team how to write Python in real time. We do the work. Like we work together on things. And I think that right there is what should be happening. You need to bring in experts who've done this before into your team, have them help you get through these first initial steps. And then once you have that, now you have the knowledge in your team a little bit more. And at least now you, like some of these problems, I find this the same way when I'm Googling things, I guess Googling is like so old school now. I should be just doing everything in ChatGPT. But when you Google things, Tommy, like, you have to know enough to know the words to write to go get the answer you're looking for, right? Like I just can't
say data and get the right results.
Yeah, I'm having data problems. Like there's not enough detail there. Like you've got to know like what you're Googling to get the right answer back. And it's very important. Even if you just hit a couple of the keywords, you just got to hit a couple of keywords to get the answer back. And I think this is the same kind of pattern here where organizations, if they don't know what to build in Fabric, they're not even hitting the keywords. I couldn't even Google the right things to go figure out like why, like Fabric pipeline, variable sets, like what are like
Monty Python in the Fabric notebook. Yeah.
Why am I even Googling these things? So I think that's where we're at. We don't even need what to say yet, and you need some level of like term knowledge to then start getting your team to learn on the right direction.
Yeah. The last point I'm going to say here, because I don't want to hammer it, is you just brought up something that I'm finding really exclusively with Fabric. It's almost impossible for me with a lot of these projects where the consultant is just going to do the work and hand off without that really intimate relationship of upskilling their team too. I don't know if we live in that world anymore, to be honest, but yeah, really good things there.
Yeah. What other topics do you have here, Tommy, for us?
We have a few more, Mike. Well, we have some Copilot updates. I know we've been hammering this, but you know what? Copilot is where it's at, baby. So what actually just came out, I believe yesterday. Yes, yesterday is now available after build. Chat with your data is available now. So this is a independent icon on the left-hand side button on your Power BI or Fabric experience app.Power BI, where you can chat with your data. Again, this goes with data that's already been prepped. We actually had a conversation about this already, but this is now available for organizations and it's off by default. So again, this is something that you have to do and enable in your admin settings, which I am really, really happy that the Microsoft team decided that and not one of these on by default features. We talked.
Oh man. Yeah. Well, I'm waiting. I'm waiting.
They love to do on by default.
Yes, or off by default for like 3 months, and then on by default after that. So, I don't know, Tommy. Like I'm on the. You're exactly right. Like I really like the idea that they made it off by default because again, this could be a very large impact to your tenant as well.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
I feel like we're going to get to a place where it's off by default for now. And at some point in the future, 6 months, a year from now, they're going to be like, oh, by the way, we're changing it now. We're not going to just kind of turn on the experience by default in the future. So yeah, we'll see how that goes.
And again, that to me goes back to, it's a feature that requires so much internal development just to, I think, be able to turn on. There were other things like the filter page. Like, yeah, we can turn that on. That's fine with me. We can't just turn this on, expect it to work. The other part of that is also the enable Copilot for portals and websites, which is it. And I think this is only for the true embedded. I don't think this is unpublished to the web that you'll have this. But if I embed or put something in an embedded report or for portals and websites, I can now also have that enabled with Copilot. So I'm actually surprised how quick after build this is already on or now enabled here. So if that's one of your goals, there's a lot of work to do here.
One thing that I think would be interesting here, and again, I'm thinking about this Copilot experience, and like once you go into the admin settings and turn on, just a word of maybe not caution or guidance or something like here, but when you turn on Copilot, whenever you have that on some sort of capacity, now you turn it on, you need some capacity to run it on. It just can't be standalone.
Right.
So if you're going to use the Copilot, you need to be able to say, okay, there's an F SKU, the non F64 trial version. Something has to be there for you to turn it on and then attach it to. I'm almost of the opinion right now. Again, there is an AI in the usage metrics. There is an AI related activity that shows you when AI is happening. But if I wish this feature, if you turned it on for a group of users, I wish you as the admin could set it up so that it would automatically go to a single workspace. Because there is a feature where you can actually make Copilot automatically, like you can do a dedicated Copilot experience.
Yeah.
Because what you don't want is your production or other things that you're working on, people asking a bunch of questions and all of a sudden running out of compute units very quickly. So let me say it this way. If you're an organization that's large enough where you have a dev version of Fabric and a test and prod version of Fabric or a Fabric SKU, okay, let's call it that, Fabric SKUs, I feel like I would recommend putting this Copilot experience on the dev Copilot. That way, if it runs out of tokens, if you run it out of CU, at least you know it's not breaking anything in production, because you could submit a lot of queries you could stop semantic models from running because it's adding contention to that usage and compute.
You're right. You can't That's a good point, Mike. You can't do both. You can't have a workspace that has both licensing there, where I have something dedicated for Copilot.
Well,
And
yes and no. Yes and no. Like, so there you can do so if you wanted to centralize Copilot down to a single user, right? What you have to do is you have to say, use a security group. These are the users that will get. So here's the dedicated Copilot. So you actually have like a designation, like this is a capacity that is,
Copilot,
yeah. So basically, this is the capacity. This capacity is the only one I want to use for Copilot, just that capacity. So you have to turn that on.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have users attached to that. So that way, when those users use Copilot, they're only using the dedicated Copilot capacity. And then when you make the new Copilot, or you turn on the Copilot for everyone, right? So when you turn on the new Copilot experience, that's the standalone experience, you open it up to the same user group. That way they can only pick or only use that dedicated Copilot capacity. So I think that's the combination you want to do. But again, I'm just pointing this out because it's not centralized. It's not in one single space. You have to like do settings that like, okay, I've got to go over to the capacity. I've got to adjust some settings. I've got to go over to the admin portal. I've got to adjust some settings. I need a security group that is in both places. So I'm thinking about this in like a best practice and guidance.
Right.
If you're going to use it, make sure you're making a security group and rolling it out slowly to that team. Right. To your point, Tommy, this fits very well with your goals in the age of Fabric. Like, how do you roll this stuff out? Like, that's what you do. Right. You start out small, you make a security group, and you put it where you need, and then you go from there.
Especially the fact too that this is that unlike the report Copilot, this is a standalone. It doesn't live in a workspace, even though obviously it's going to be using capacity workspaces and their capacities to the user. I mean, if they say, show me the sales, that has to come from that certain workspace. But I would agree with you in that structure, because honestly, I couldn't imagine doing it a different way without you're going to be spending more or wasting something more than you would want to. So that is available, and the embedding is now available. Mike, I got a problem with our next news feature, and I want to see if you agree with me. This is actually a VS Code, how to debug user data functions locally in VS Code.
Oh, man.
And
I'm struggling with this one too.
So, but this is why I have some issues with this, because I think it's failing to see the audience here. Cool feature, like it, love it. I'm going to use it. However, some of the Q&A things here, FAQ at the bottom. What are the reasons for the squiggly underlines appearing after import statements? If you've ever written any Python or done anything, you know why, or you know what the red squiggly lines are for. They're obviously errors. There's they are for, what is it called? Simply a package that's not available, whatever them may be, something misspelled, or that action's unavailable. And they're talking about the requirements. They're talking about these local settings. They're talking about very basic things if you've ever done any Python. Again, I'm not a Python developer, but I can tell you what all those mean just by having some experience. So my question for you here, and here's where I got a bone to pick, so to speak, is who's creating user data functions but not aware of any of this, right? Because I mean, this is the struggle I'm having with. They're introducing some awesome features. I love the idea of user data functions, so I want to preface it that way. Microsoft doing great. However, to me, the Joe Schmo or whoever is not just going like, you know what, I'm going to create a user data function today. The only thing I've ever done was a few calculations in Excel, and I've created a DAX statement, and I'm going to dive right into the deep end of Python here and just figure it out. I don't think that's happening. And if it is, tell me I'm wrong, please. But I don't think that's happening today.
No.
So yeah.
No, this is so a couple things. The user data functions is Azure Functions now brought to Fabric as is functions as a service, basically. Right. It's a software as a service offering of functions that now exist in here. So
something with Python code. But yeah.
The story, there's two stories here. The story is here. Look, it's not so like the fact that these are here, it does give you some helping mechanisms to like help you get started. But you are writing pure Python. You are writing a full function that needs to be deployed into Fabric and do a specific thing. So this is not for the faint of heart. This is definitely for, I would say, a very senior data engineering mode of things. This is not This is not a Power BI user in my mind. This is someone who understands code, who's done functions, who's maybe built applications before. Because it is Python, the gap isn't too far away from people that would be business users. But you're not giving this to any old normal business user. You're finding the ones that have written a lot of code, who are writing lots of notebooks, who have very specific use cases to do this thing. And there is a really good presentation out there. I did one on YouTube with Shunjata, where we went through like 4 or 5 like really good solid use cases. Like, hey, you have a report and you want to update records. Great. You have a report. You want to then insert a new row to a table and have the data table like right back. That's one of the use cases. I have a table and I want to take actions right away. I want to send a message, or I want to run a piece of data through some AI and then have it come back as an answer. All those things are now possible. So, I mean, the user data functions extend an amazing amount of extra space where you can build custom things inside Fabric. Yeah, go ahead, Tommy.
No, I was going to say, and yet I would be remiss. Could the devil's advocate here be, you don't need to be that expert Python or experience if I have Copilot?
Oh, so I think the answer is there. Yes, I think you do need. It will assist you.
Yeah,
it will assist you, but it's still, in my opinion, it's still not. You're not. Again, even if you are there, do you even know how to write the imports? Do you even know how to use the local settings.json? So I think the reason they're putting these things out there is because if you're an Azure Functions developer, these are all things that you've already read in the documentation around Azure Functions and how you run them locally. My opinion here also is I don't really love the whole VS Code desktop experience in editing functions at this point. Just because there's this whole idea of like, okay, I'm in Fabric, I've made a function and I'm getting it down to my local VS Code, which is nice because I have a whole other series of Copilots I can use down there. But the downside is it's not very easy to get the code published back into the service. Like the way the UI is written, maybe you can do it, but it's just difficult to find the button of like, I should be able to pull down a file, make the edits and hit publish, and it should just go right back up. It should just come down and back up, no problem. I should be able to bring the code down. And then when I bring the code down into my VS Code, it should automatically recognize, hey, I need this local settings file. Hey, I need these packages and import library pieces to be imported and actually added, right? They're talking about here, why are there squiggly lines? But when I run it, it works, right? Well, the idea is it says the first time you run it, all the libraries will be installed using pip. Well, why not just do it? Why not when I bring the code down?
Right.
So it just, to me, things just seem like out of sequence. Like the things that I would have expected, like if I'm bringing the notebook down and the pip libraries are not there, sure, give me the squiggly line, but then also note to me like, hey, this library doesn't involve, right click here to install it. And it runs a command line down below and we're done. Like that's what you want.
Right.
So it shouldn't be this mysterious, there's like knowledge gaps, I feel like, in this functions piece that I just don't really love.
It's the same with notebook. Well, notebooks is almost the opposite, where you can get notebooks running, so to speak, locally, but you are very limited. You don't have all the packages or some of the major ones. I don't have MS Spark Utilities, which is kind of a big one. And so it makes it, I agree with you. I love the idea, but if I'm going to use that exclusively, which honestly, if you were to ask me personally, which one would you use exclusively, VS Code or the web? I would want to use VS Code on my desktop if I could.
I mean, yes,
personally,
but right now,
where's all the things it needed?
Where's the better experience?
Right,
like right now, to me, right now,
where's
this moment,
experience.
The better experience right now with developing these things is just build it in the web. I mean, and that's fine. I'm okay. I'm actually very okay with doing the function development inside the web. All the libraries are installed. All the things that are there that need to be there. I can send in sample data and it can do things to it. Like, great. Like that's what it should be doing.
Right.
So I'm totally fine with the development of the functions to stay inside Fabric in the browser.
Well,
it's just better. Too painful to work in desktop at this time.
Do me one better.
To work in VS Code.
This will kind of be a little segue to our topic today, but do me one better. Right now we have the Azure Data Function, User Data Functions extension, and we have the VS Code extension for notebooks. But those don't work with the same Git repository that you may have downloaded. And I don't know, to me, this is way out of whack for me. It gets me out of the experience. Let's say, Mike, I want to edit a notebook that I'm using in Git, right? So I've downloaded that repository and I want to use the whole VS Code experience with Git or VS Code with a notebook from my Git repository. Well, I can't use that same file, that actual same IPNYB file extension to do so. I actually have to create another folder with the VS Code extension for notebooks to then actually edit that so it actually connects to my Fabric capacity. You know what I'm trying to say here? Am I saying this clearly?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to me, that's such a weird, out of whack experience where, to me, if I have Git, it's not just to use it on the web. It's like, oh, look, here it is on my computer. Now I can edit that notebook and I can use all the functions, yada, 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 and do that. But that's kind of out of whack still, which is just, oh, I just want this seamless. And I know that it's a lot of work, but to us, I think as the users and the pro users, when you see something, when you see a feature or the name of a feature, you kind of expect it to work as it should. And I think it talks about our AI things too. If I have my Git repository with my notebooks and my user data functions that are a file, well, I should theoretically be able to edit that file and do all the things that I was already doing. We're getting there, and I think we're seeing that too with what's new with CI/CD. Mike, do we want to talk about the analysis server? Or do we want to just go head into our topic today?
We're very far in. A lot of news, a lot of talking about things. Again, this is kind of like the reaction to things that came out at Build that we're trying to react to. So let's jump over. Let's move over to our main topic. We'll go CI/CD. Frame us out here. So we've been talking about just kind of news items are coming out here, functions, all these other pieces. Let's actually move on to our main topic around what's new in Microsoft Fabric continuous integration and continuous deployment. This is an article that I'll put in the chat window directly from Microsoft, and we'll kind of unpack this article as we go here.
Yeah, so there's a few features that came out, but I think there's that greater also conversation that I want to have with you is for more and more users around this, if you've never used Git or if you've never used anything like it, it still can be very intimidating. However, that being said, I think we're finding that more pro users are adopting it or should be adopting it. And what they're doing and the amount of effort that Microsoft's putting into CI/CD, exclusively Git, is pretty extensive, where they're making this, to me, the kind of de facto way to really work in a workspace. With that being said, and we'll dive into whether that's the case or not, but there's some major features here, Mike, that I just wanted to cover with you. And we'll talk about, and I think, like I said, that will get to the greater conversation of you as the pro now. Should that be kind of a prerequisite skill? But let's kind of just dive into some of the skills where, Mike, automation, maybe one of our top 5 favorite words in the world out there, where how can we automate things? You and I were talking about this on the podcast. Gosh, anything that's manual, if I do anything more than 3 times a week, I need to find a way to automate it. And one of the things that they have here is an API, automate Git integration using APIs, which, Mike, have you seen this? Have you used this at all yet?
I have not. We don't use a lot of APIs. We're doing more of this through let's call it the built-in deployment pipeline experience. So there's an API that kind of is behind the scenes that's like doing something like this, like get a connection, update your Git provider. So this can be automated with a number of other things. So when you're talking about moving things in and out, so do we use this? No, we're working with organizations that are just trying to get their head around, like, okay, do we even need dev test prod? Like, let's get that started, right? So I feel like the very first entry level to this is getting started there, building deployment pipelines. So we've done a lot of like, okay, we have a workspace that is prod. Well, we know we recognize we need to have dev and test. So how do we reverse deploy the code back through the environment so we get everything like aligned, right? There's lots of different branching strategies. One of the ones, like there's trunk-based deployments. There is GitHub branching strategies. There's GitLabs deployment strategies. There's different strategies here. And I think what the APIs do is the APIs allow you to have more options on how your business needs to function and how you want to deploy things. Like, for example, one pattern could be have your main branch pointed to dev. Dev is your integration tests for all the developers. Developer takes code, they create their own branch, they make their changes, and then they push, they do the pull request into main, which then updates the dev workspace. And then you use deployment pipelines to go from dev to test to prod. This is kind of the pattern that Microsoft uses. This works really well for Power BI assets, but not so much for lakehouses and notebooks. There's other considerations you have to build there. So what we're seeing now is the CDI/CD is getting better to enhance those things. A second pattern would be you have a Git repo that has 3 non-destroyable branches. There's a branch for dev, there's a branch for test, and there's a branch for prod. So each of these branches have very specific functions, and you can push code into them, but you can never delete them. That's the point. They're a non-deleting branch on your development cycle. And so then you can build things in dev, and then you can then compare what happened in dev to test, and then you could start a cadence of doing this and deploying things. So again, I think the APIs is nice. It's going to enable us to do a lot more with different patterns on how you want to deploy things.
Yeah, slight hot take here, and let's see how well you are on this scale, if you agree or disagree. If I'm dealing with a team, and to your point, with kind of workshopping with other teams, one of them that I've had on a recurring basis is just talking to them about Git and whether or not Git makes sense for this BI team. And to me, I'm leaning more and more on, if I am going to deploy or recommend Git for a team that has not used Git, or let's say is basic in Git, I am setting them up as much automation and actions as possible to make this as seamless as possible, rather than they're having to learn all those different little, commands on the terminal. I need to make this as easy as possible for teams, and especially if I want to get them started, because there is an education here, there is a learning curve here, and there's going to be mistakes that occur. There's no question about that. If you're dealing with a team who is just beginning that CI/CD journey, or not aware of all the ins and outs, but I want them to use it. I like Git. I love Git. Actually, I think it makes so much more sense where the way I can version control. I've been trying to do this for years before this was even available with a semantic model and a report, but yeah. I can't expect them to say, all right, you have a dev and you have a prod, and just, publish to this branch, but just expanded to this. There's going to be mistakes happen, especially if there's collaboration. So with the APIs, with the GitHub actions, I have to set this up if they're going to be successful.
I'm going to point out, yes, I agree with you, Tommy. There's definitely something there, but I think there's different levels of experience that are used in this space, right? So if I'm a team that's just looking for backups, I'm going to do a Git,
very good point.
Right? So like, if we're just starting out, like I'm just coming from Power BI, and like, look, here's the I'm always going back to let's identify the challenge and then what we could use to solve it, right? The challenge is, right, I have deployed something into a workspace and I broke it, right? And I don't have that old copy of the Power BI desktop file, right? Something like that, right? Or maybe I'm in Power BI and I'm like, hey, look, I have made a report, and then I have a semantic model, and then I've made an app, right? So in the app, you get a copy of the report pointed to the same semantic model. So the app runs along, no problem, just clips along, not a problem. I may change the semantic model to update my report in the workspace, and somehow that has broken my app report, because that's a different report, and I maybe have changed something in the semantic model that physically broke what was inside the app. I don't have full separation between when I'm working on testing things and when I'm actually deploying things in the app. So what happens here is you run into this problem of like, oh no, I need to revert. I need to undo something. I need to synchronize the changes. So the very small use case here is, look, just keep building things in the workspace, deploy what you want to deploy, do what you got to do, and then you just need a backup. I'm just looking for backups of things. That's pretty lightweight. And I would argue every Power BI user could get their heads around what that means. Look, I make a change. The little icon is no longer green. It says it's not synced. I just synchronize it. That's it. That's all you're doing. So I think that's like the very low threshold here is we need abilities to back up our things and no longer work as if we're like having to rebuild stuff.
Yeah.
So I want to move away from tracking everything in SharePoint. I want to track it in Git, but I want to make sure it's a backup of the workspace. I have found really good success in kind of keeping those things up to date. I think that works fairly well. Syncing works really well in that use case. I'm good with it.
And it's a pretty good kiddie pool that, with some swim helpers, especially if you're diving into the pool too, where you are, for a lot of users, you can still just worry about publishing.
Yep.
Your process doesn't change a lot, but then if you do need to see that version control, it's all there. It's a good introduction. And yeah, I really like that as an introductory piece.
So in that scenario, I'm not going to Azure DevOps or GitHub and downloading the files. I'm not doing other things. What I'm doing is I'm relying on the workspace. Now, when I do a synchronization to a workspace, I feel much more confident now letting the workspace be the source of truth for those files.
Right.
And what I mean by that is, before I would be like, dude, never, ever, ever deploy something to powerbi.com and then download the report, edit it, and then push it back up, right? I'd always want you to have some other place where I could store that file. But I feel like over the last year, there hasn't been very many things. I'm having less and less issues of downloading something specifically from powerbi.com.
Yeah.
So the fact that I can almost download everything now without issue, and I'm having less and less problems with that. I'm feeling more confident. Just like, okay, fine. I deploy a report. I've got some internal reports I do for my business. I don't even keep a SharePoint copy anymore. I just let powerbi.com be the source of truth for that file. And when I need it again, if I want to make an edit, I go into the experience in powerbi.com, make my simple edits. Or if I need more complex edits, I bundle it up and download it. And I can download just the semantic model. I can also download just the report now. Like, it's giving me options on how this works.
I just realized I'm doing the same thing. I barely use SharePoint, where that used to be the first thing if I start my computer. And also too, let's not forget, like, you don't have to have VS Code or even use the terminal to use Git. Like, there's GitHub Desktop, which is a pretty user-friendly application.
Yeah.
But that being said, though, that next step when it comes to Git, and I think a lot of the article here, Microsoft seems to be, and tell me if I'm wrong here, if this is a good take, but it seems like their focus on the Git integration is for the more advanced users, the more advanced teams here. We're not dealing with this simple Git anymore, of simple Git push features that would be for your basic user. Because we're talking about service principal support. We're talking about variable support.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Yes, you are right.
So,
I would agree with you there. Yeah. But these are the features these are the features that pro developers like. So, just the synchronizing of things back and forth. That's fine, right? And the other thing that was another huge pain point for me was, like, I couldn't get a Dataflow Gen 2 into a CI/CD pipeline. That was a big issue for me. So a lot of that I was like, well, I don't use Dataflow's Gen 2 because I couldn't push it into the Git experience. I couldn't synchronize it. Like, I could do the work on it, but I couldn't get it stored anywhere. Like, this was not good for me. So, like, there's a lot of things here that I was like, it wasn't. But now that more of those things are being covered by the CI/CD, I'm cool with it. But that first stage is, think of the Git as a backup. That's your first stage. What you're talking about now, Tommy, is like, okay, now I want to have a more complex deployment strategy, and this is where we get a bit more enterprise centric, and this is where I think the team starts growing. Right. Yeah. Before, I had maybe one, maybe two developers working in a workspace together. But when your team gets up to 5 people and you have multiple people pushing things in and out, the size of the team scaling up, from a business leader standpoint, the business leader wants people to show up and have, like, look, hey, we need to build more reports faster. We need to get data models done quicker. What's the best way to do that? Let's add another person to the project. Great. Adding more people to the project doesn't necessarily make it go faster. If you can only edit one semantic model at a time, putting 2 people to edit it and tune it isn't a good thing. Right. Because now you're trying to coordinate between 2 people. Like, what did you change? What did I change? Are your changes interfacing with my changes? Like, it doesn't work as good. But when you start incorporating Git, you're now able to throw a process. Here's the process down. And you can throw more people at the process you're building, which then makes it go faster. So now the business leaders have a better, more compelling story. Hey, we want to go faster and build more things. Great. Throw more people at it. They just jump in, learn the process, and now everyone can play on the same files together in the same space. That's the idea of Git. The Git experience allows you extending the space of developers.
And that's also the transition too for a lot of users, their skill, right? Where the first kind of level one you said, I like how we're using all these. Maybe it's because my kids are asking me about Mario 64, so I'm in this like level one, level two kind of thinking. But and like your level one is that backup where I don't have to know anything else. I don't really have to do anything else, but I have to be aware of a few things. But really, critically, my process or my knowledge doesn't change. But then there's this shift, right? Where if I'm going to start be relying on Git more, well, now I have to be aware not just of the Git, but Tyndall. Right now, I'm also kind of being aware of some different code and how I'm looking at those reports is going to
Yep.
be shifting and required. Where honestly, I think a lot of teams can survive on the backup or even the dev prod, where, if the dev prod can still be something where I'm just dealing with desktop and report. If I know Tyndall, great. I don't have to. It's not a
Hmm.
requirement. Does not really, it can make my life easier, but it's not a deal breaker. And
Yeah.
I think also too, for both the heavy Git users and for the heavy Fabric users, the fact that now there's no deal breakers left or limited, where it's like, hey, there's no data flows, can't use it. Sorry, we can't. It doesn't have all the features. But there's this shift, Mike, where I'm going to keep asking this question every 3 months, I think, and we'll see when the answer changes. But there is this shift, though, with all these features coming out with CI/CD, even the Fabric command line, which I think is really cool. Where at what point am I expecting a heavy Power BI or Fabric Pro that maybe I would hire or maybe I would lease for a project that I'm working on, that I'm expecting them to know Git and I'm expecting them to know Tyndall, right? Because to me, you're really not doing Tyndall unless you're doing Git. I feel like they're very intertwined. They're they're dancing to the same song.
Hmm.
And let me ask you this question. Do you think, or are you only hiring an expert in Power BI or Fabric, but they got to know Git too? Is that one of the prerequisites? Yet, now, or later? Or I guess that doesn't make sense. But are you looking to hire someone and they should know Git? Is that an expectation for you?
Give me your opinion, Tommy, first, and then I'll jump into my opinion.
I think if I'm hiring someone who says they're in the Fabric experience and they've been doing Fabric, I kind of am. I'm kind of looking for that, and I'm going to be a little disappointed if they're not.
Depends on how big my team is, right? If my team is one person, I'm hiring the one person to get into my team to do the
Sure.
one Fabric. If they've experienced it a little bit, I'm okay with it. But if you are a team of like 6 people and I'm hiring the seventh person to come in to use Fabric with us, I'm going to expect that I'm hiring that person who already has understood it, knows how it works, can at least speak to why Git is important and how it exists. Like, give me some patterns, right? So I'm not going to want to bring in someone who's so green. So if my team's larger,
Yeah.
I'm gonna think that we're already trying to agree that we're going to be using Git on some
Right.
things. If my team's smaller and I'm bringing that first person in, I want you to have knowledge of it, but we'll probably train you to get you up
Right.
to speed on what Git is doing, right? So I think it depends on your team size, because I would rather hire for a larger team. I'd rather hire someone who's going to be able to hit the ground running, as opposed to having to bring them in and then go through all the Fabric, Git
Yeah.
integration stuff and get it figured
Yeah.
out there.
No, and the team matters here because there's a project I'm about to help launch for Fabric. We're not talking Git at all, even though they're going to be pretty extensive here. The fact it really deals with, I mean, I think how much that team's already aware of what's available in Fabric or that skill. It's funny how these Fabric skills, data engineering, notebooks, even semantic model, where I'm almost equating that to, if you're not experienced in that, there's no reason to know Git. But previously, that was not ever a situation where I didn't need to know Git to do anything with notebooks. I didn't need to know Git to do anything with semantic model report building.
Mm.
But if you're more experienced and if you have a larger organization, yeah, they kind of go as part of that package now to me. But no, I think for my team personally, I would want that. But if I'm dealing with a client and we're just getting introduced to a lot of this, I'm not even touching it. I'm not even touching it for the backup yet because that's too many concepts. So uh it's a curious situation where when we come to when does that become just a general prerequisite?
Say that again.
It's curious to me, when does Git and source control just become a
Oh,
general prerequisite?
again, I think I think regardless, whatever you look at this, there's going to be some value in this regardless, right?
Yeah.
If you're just starting out with this, if you're just coming from Power BI, you're probably going to be very familiar with like OneDrive and SharePoint. That's where you're going to store your stuff. That's fine. But I think your pattern very quickly changes when you just have a workspace that's now in Fabric or a workspace that's now on Premium. To me, I'm thinking of immediately everyone should be using Git as a way of backing up their stuff, period. Like that should just be done. Like we should just have that working. Like to me, there's so little effort going on there that just makes it happy. To me, also, if my team is allowed to edit reports in the PowerBI.com service, 100%, I'm saying you need to turn on Git on that workspace. That's one thing I'm immediately turning on for that workspace, because that way, if I edit in the service, if I edit locally, I can at least do a diff compare on what changes were made, right? Someone in the service may make a change and synchronize those changes. I may make a change in desktop or downloading something from SharePoint and make a change. I want my source of truth to be the Git repo. That's the shift here that's happening. So I really like that experience, and that's I feel like Microsoft has done a decent job of making that easy to use, easy to get started. Love it.
Right. My last question here. I got a data scenario for you. Pretty basic here. You got a person, you need to upskill them in one of three areas. You tell me what the priority is. And again, obviously there's a lot of gotchas here, but more or less notebooks, AI, Git. Organization will say is pretty far ahead with Fabric. They're doing a lot of things in Fabric already. This person you're going to rely on a lot. Where are you going to prioritize their upskill? Copilot, notebooks, or Git?
Good question. Let me think about that for a minute. I think a
mine,
lot of yeah. You go. You say yours first, and then I'll follow up with mine. I think I've got an idea.
To be very honest, I'm going to start with Git because I'm assuming this organization, if it's beginning to dabble in this, it really starts here. As much as those are maybe more urgent, if you don't have the Git background, again, that's where the process is going to begin and end. So, and I can teach you, or you can upskill and Git pretty quickly. It doesn't have nearly the same conceptual things or the same, I think, amount of time to get a hold of the basic push, commit, stage, merge, because we're already going to be doing that. And it's not that crosses every platform and product you're going to touch in Fabric. So for me, out of all those three, I would start with Git.
Interesting. I think I'm of the opinion of I think I would actually put them in notebooks. I think there's more. So Git is interesting. Git is very much a process built thing. I'm not sure a lot of organizations have the stomach to slow down and build process at this point, especially when they're starting to get going, right? Power BI is a commodity now. We're now building lots of reports. There's lots of things that could be happening. There's probably stuff out there that's really good and very useful. There's probably lots of stuff in the organization that's just mediocre at best, and it gets the job done, but it's not at our standards, basically.
Yeah.
So I feel like a lot of the pattern that I see right now is build something that works, come back, and then optimize on your second build, right? So I think a lot of what I'm doing is I'm taking a lot of these legacy Power BI things like data flows Gen 1, data flows Gen 2, and I'm probably trying to migrate them into notebooks. I do so much work with notebooks, Tommy, and honestly, Tommy, every time I get to a place where I'm going to build some data engineering, the sooner I can get to a notebook, the happier I am. Every time I start smiling, I get really happy about the experience. Of the places that I get to go do things, it just is. It's so flexible. It does so much, and it's so much more cost effective in a compute units than it is in the data flows Gen 1 and Gen Flow 2 area. I just like it. I can do anything I want there. I can think about what's really right for the data models and how do I shape the data. It just makes sense in my brain. So again, I'm a little bit slanted here as well because I come from the data science notebooks arena a bit more than most people. So I think if I'm looking at it from a value back to the business, there's definitely value in GitHub.
Yes.
I think there's more value if I compare that against notebooks and running things more efficiently. I think there's more value in running your system more efficiently with notebooks and saving compute units so I can do more things. So I think that's the place where I would put my people first. And then once we've got those notebooks in and running, then I'm probably going to start stepping back and saying, look, let's start integrating Git in various places. And again, if we're talking about the very easy Git, like just synchronizing a workspace to get backups, it's not hard to learn. It's not difficult to get going.
Right.
But if you want to do full dev, test, prod branching with multiple merge and pull requests, and then pulling code down from a repo and using it in VS Code, like there's a whole bunch of other things that could be going on here that can make this really robust from a process standpoint. But the process, it's going to slow people down.
Yeah.
When you add process initially, it's going to slow down before it speeds it up.
I don't even know if you're aware of this, Mike, but you've already brought out 2 out of like the 19 chapters of the Mythical Man Month too. So for those of you who are listening here, a lot of things we're talking about here came from kind of software development. Mike, you talked about throwing more people at it. The myth is it's going to go faster, and the idea of the second system effect. So, man, are we nerds? I feel like we're. Can we be less nerds because we're talking about the Git stuff? But that being said, my closing thought here for those of you listening, if you think the Git and the Python and the notebooks are nerdy, they're not. They're cool. It's cool if you're not 15. They're actually pretty cool. And here's the thing with a lot of this stuff, it's a playground we're living in. A lot of these things, though, too, are people are going to be asking for this. People are asking for this. I am finding so much success with Git without having to be a nerd and but being dumb. Personally, I'm dumb and I can use Git. And there's a lot here where you can find a lot of processes and also a lot of CYA. So my last thought is here. Love what we're doing with Git. Love what we're seeing here with source control. Still a ton more. Mike, I'll drop it to you for your closing thoughts.
Yeah, I like where we're going here. Microsoft is taking this very seriously. They're making a lot of improvements here. I will argue that Microsoft is focusing a lot on continuous integration and continuous deployment. They're not necessarily focusing on DevOps. DevOps is more about the process that you use that uses continuous integration and continuous deployment. So I just want to be very, very clear that this is a part of a broader solution. When we talk DevOps, CI/CD is not DevOps. DevOps is a bigger topic. It's more about the process, the team, how people interact with your code. But CI/CD is a small part of a bigger story. And I think one thing I see right now, especially in the Power BI community, is a lot of people are very excited about CI/CD. Good. I'm happy about it. Microsoft's building a lot of things for CI/CD. Great. I love it. But at the end of the day, CI/CD is not really everything you're going to need. It's a part of it's the potatoes to your dinner, right? It's part of the dinner meal, right? There's other food. You need to have some vegetables. You got to have some meat in there. You got to have some variety of some other things in there. You can't just eat one piece of food and call it done. So this is a part of a larger meal. So all that saying, I do want to say thank you all for hanging out and chatting with us. I know we had a longer news section today. Thank you for hanging out for that portion. I hope this story around the continuous integration and deployment was interesting to you. We think this is a great article. Definitely check out the link in the description below if you want to learn more about what is new in Fabric CI/CD for May 2025. Automation of Git APIs, automatic deployment using Fabric APIs, and now more around Fabric CI/CD. These are going to change how your team builds things. So we want you to know about these things, unpack them, understand how this all works. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. Do you have a topic, an idea, or a question that you want to ask us? Well, head over to powerbi.tips/podcast. Leave your name and a great question. Keep them coming. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central. And join the conversation on all of PowerBI.Tips social media channels.
Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.